All right, today we're going to put on our detective hats and dive into a real financial mystery. It's all about a massive power company that from the outside looks like an absolute giant. But as you'll see, it's hiding a pretty catastrophic secret. So just imagine this for a second. You're running a company and you bill your customers over 19 billion. I mean, you'd think you'd be swimming in cash, right? But what if I told you that same company was actually teetering on the very edge of financial ruin? That's the puzzle we're going to piece together today. To get to the bottom of this, we really need to start with the customers. And it's basically a tale of two completely different groups. We're talking millions of regular homes and then just a handful of factories. So first things first, check out the sheer number of customers. A whopping 88% of this company's 5.3 million customers are just regular folks in their homes. So numerically speaking, they are the absolute bedrock of this entire operation. But here's where it gets interesting, the first real twist. Even though households make up almost all of the customers, they are not the biggest energy users. See that? A tiny group of industrial clients, just a few factories and big businesses, are gulping down a massive 29% of all the power sold. So right away, you've got this fascinating contrast, a business built on millions of tiny users and a few really, really big ones. And that little detail is right at the heart of our story. Okay, so let's shift gears and talk about the money, because on paper, this company is generating an absolute fortune. I mean, the top line numbers look incredible. And here is where you see that illusion of success. The company sent out bills for nearly 19.4 billion. That's a monumental number that just screams thriving business. But the key word here, and you really got to remember this, is billed. That's the amount of money they asked for, not what they actually got. Now, before we get to the real drama, there's one more layer we need to peel back here. Turns out a pretty big chunk of that 19 billion doesn't even come directly from the customers paying their bills. It comes from a kind of hidden helper. Yep, the government is kicking in over $1 billion in subsidies. And this money is really important because it goes straight to lowering the bills for the biggest groups of home customers. For one group, it covers more than 6% of their total bill. So what this tells us is that the business is already depending on outside cash just to make its numbers work on paper. And now, we have arrived at the core of the mystery, what I'm calling the Great Collection Crisis. This is the exact moment where that beautiful illusion of success just shatters into a million pieces. You know, this is probably the most important question for any business, anywhere. Is billing money the same thing as collecting it? Just because you send out an invoice for 19 billion, does that mean you actually have 19 billion in the bank? Well, in this case, the answer is a big, resounding no. And here it is, the number that changes everything. Of all the money the company billed, it only managed to collect 29%. Just let that sink in for a second. For every $100 they asked for, they only got $29 in their pocket. It's just stunning. This chart just lays the whole disaster bare. Look at that. On the left, you've got this mountain of money they billed, 19.37 billion. And then look at the tiny little sliver on the right that they actually collected, just 5.61 billion. That giant gap between them, that's a financial black hole sucking the life out of this company. So the big question is, who isn't paying? Well, the breakdown is pretty wild. The big industrial customers, they're actually pretty decent payers, covering almost 68% of their bills. But look at the major domestic customers, one of the biggest groups. Their collection rate is a pathetic 6.7%. The very foundation of the customer base is exactly where the system has totally and completely failed. So, what do you think happens when billions and billions of dollars in bills go unpaid month after month, year after year? Well, you get an exploding mountain of debt. So, in the financial world, there's a term for this kind of unpaid debt. It's called arrears. You can basically think of it as ghost revenue. It's money that was billed, money the company was counting on, but it just never showed up. And as we're about to see, it is piling up at a terrifying rate. And this chart, wow, this is what that crisis looks like. The company started this period already being owed almost $44 billion. By the end of it, that unpaid debt had ballooned more than 5 times over to an unbelievable $232.9 billion. This isn't just a small problem. This is a full-blown corporate death spiral. So where does this leave us? What happens next? Let's just take a second and recap the key problems that have brought this absolutely vital utility to its knees. So, to wrap it all up, what we have is a company whose income is focused on just a few groups. A company that relies on government handouts just to look okay on paper. A company that has a massive, severe gap between what it bills and what it collects. And as a result, it is drowning under an exponentially growing mountain of debt. And that really brings us to the final lingering question. This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet, right? This is an essential service that powers millions of homes. So when a system like this fails so spectacularly, you have to ask, who is it that ultimately pays the price? And what happens when the lights start to go out?